Okay, so hi everyone that's logged in already. This is our Essentials to Marketing workshop. We're really excited to host this. I've been asked by a few people to host this workshop now just because there's so many new local businesses popping in and the world we live in, it's really important to market. That's how you're gonna get your product out there. So to start the day, I'm just going to have our economic developer, Monica, have a little 10-minute spiel about Lacombe County's economic development program. And then we're going to give it to Drew, and he's going to teach you all about marketing and everything you want to know in regards to that. So I'm just going to pass it off to Monica, and she'll take it from here.
Thanks, Jaylene. So 10 minutes or maybe 2 minutes. Just briefly wanted to introduce myself. I started with the county last September as the economic development officer. And so essentially it's a pretty broad scope for what I cover, but there's basically two main elements. And one of them is to market the county to businesses that aren't currently here, to try to create an opportunity for new investment and new business to come to the region. But the other part of it is to support our existing businesses. So to build those relationships with people like yourselves who are already operating in the county, who have established businesses, or maybe you're less established and you're starting out, basically to help you with whatever challenges you're facing. So if you need to hire staff and get them trained, you're running into some issues with that, or you need some support or some resources, I can help you with that. Events like today, connecting you with businesses that can help you with your marketing strategy, creating a business plan. If you're having trouble maybe navigating provincial and federal grant opportunities, there are a lot of programs where businesses can access funds through both levels of government and lots of other groups as well and organizations. So if you need some help kind of deciphering what's available, what applies to your business, I can help you with that as well. So I guess in a nutshell, if you're coming up against some walls with your business and trying to grow, you can call me. So basically, you know, anything from getting started to maybe it's succession planning and you want to sell your business and you're not sure what that looks like, kind of that whole spectrum. I might not have the answers on the tip of my tongue, but I will help you do that research and connect you with the resources that you need in order to be successful. So like I said, it's pretty broad, but if you're running into trouble, you can always contact me. My information is on the website, but maybe Jaylene can send a follow-up email as well to all of our participants today, so that you can just easily get in contact with me if you have questions. And I'm happy to help and to hopefully meet all of you in person at some point. And we'll do whatever we can to help you take that next step in your business, whatever that looks like. So yeah, thanks for being here today. And I'm excited, Drew, to hear your presentation as well.
Perfect, thanks, Monica. I will definitely give your contact information to them because she's a huge resource here and a lot of people don't know we even have those programs.
Yeah.
So, okay, so next up is Drew. So Drew is the Director of Strategy and Communications at Alchemy Communications Group out of Calgary. A born and raised Calgarian, Drew is a hardworking, goal-oriented communications professional with a strong background in external communications, storytelling, media relations, and crisis communication. Before joining the Alchemy Group in January of 2020, Drew previously worked for the University of Calgary and the CBC Calgary in various communications and marketing roles. When he's not on the clock, Drew can be found dancing with his young daughters, cheering on the Calgary Flames, or strumming away on his guitar. So it's all you now, Drew.
If that doesn't sound like a stereotypical Albertan, I don't know what claims guitar. Yeah, no, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, so we're gonna get started here, and I just wanted to kind of run through a few little housekeeping items. So during the presentation, feel free to ask questions via the chat box, or also the little raise your hand function. We'll be keeping an eye on that. If you don't have questions, that's okay too. We can hold off. We'll regroup at the end if you're more comfortable kind of speaking as a group at the end there. But yeah, if there's anything, feel free to interrupt and we can go along. I try to keep these as interactive as possible. There's a few little small exercises that aren't too hard or time consuming, but it's just gets some audience participation as well. All right. Can everyone, first of all, before I get going, can everyone see my slides and hear me okay? Perfect. Take that as a yes. All right, so we start each presentation here at Alchemy with just a land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, Alchemy Communications, as inhabitants of Calgary, Alberta, honors and acknowledges Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations. We also acknowledge that the territory we work and live upon is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Okay, a little bit about Alchemy. So we are a full service marketing communications agency based in Calgary, Alberta. We specialize in marketing, PR, crisis communications, and we work with small to medium-sized businesses, nonprofits, as well as municipalities. So a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. So today we're going to be kind of talking a bit about marketing at a higher level, which is why it's kind of the intro to marketing, marketing 101. I was saying earlier that we could probably spend a full presentation on each one of these points or slides. There's a lot to dive in here, but we'll go through it and we'll provide you with some valuable information that you can take away and hit the ground running just based on this presentation. All right, so what can marketing do for you? Many of you probably have heard of the term marketing and understand it in various different fashions or facets, but marketing can go a long way in a number of different ways. It is more than just ads or fancy images, graphics, or catchy slogans and messages. The ways that marketing can actually assist you is that it helps you also understand how your product or service connects with the needs of your customers, which is huge. There's a lot of background data that we can use when we start getting into marketing campaigns and PR campaigns that really help you hone in and target those audiences that you want to reach. Marketing can also create that trust between your brand and your customer, which is huge. As soon as that trust may be broken or lost, it's very hard to rebuild that back in terms of a customer base. So that's when we start kind of diving in or delving into that crisis communication scenarios where we need to rebuild those relationships. So if you identify that right off the bat with your marketing initiatives, it goes a long way for the future of your business, as well as that just the length of which you're trying to obtain and kind of keep those customers as well. Marketing also allows you to focus the efforts and investments strategically. So one area that we notice with a lot of our clients is they say, well, we have this marketing budget. What can we do? Which is great, but sometimes you need to really dive a little bit deeper into that. And one thing that I always see is that sometimes people invest in the wrong areas just because they have heard it before. They're buzzwords like social ads. We need Google ads or we need Facebook ads. But sometimes those strategies, they may have a good return, but you might not be ready for that yet, right? So it's just really about focusing and strategically planning how you want to use your marketing dollars. Marketing can also help define your core values if you don't have them, or reinforce them with your customer base. You can build those into your messaging. You can establish messages based on what you're seeing in marketing or feedback that you're receiving based on marketing campaigns. And then finally, it also drives growth, not only from sort of a business side of things, but also a brand awareness. So they kind of go part and parcel. So the success of your business also drives the success of your brand and vice versa. So as I mentioned before, if you sort of break that trust or it starts to deviate, then you'll see that they affect each other as well. All right, so you probably listened to what I just said and says, yeah, I understand. I know, I get it. I understand. Well, where do I begin? So the big thing you'll hear from me during this presentation is that I'm a big planner, and it goes a long way. So starting out with marketing plans or even just jotting ideas down is a great way to start. You need to put direction and focus into this when you're starting to build out your branding, your services, some promotional ideas you have, even products, pricing, anything that you want to get out there, you should write it down and plan for how you want to message that and get that out to your market. All of this is marketing. So there's print ads, there's social media, there's advertising, blogs, paid media, earned media. Those are a lot of terms that you're probably a little bit overwhelmed with right now, but they all fall into that marketing world, in that marketing funnel. So they all play off of each other. So one thing that I also tell my clients, and when I'm doing these presentations, that with all the options out there, it can be difficult for small businesses to really know what to do and what to hone in on. Like, where do we start, right? So it's daunting, it's intimidating, but it's not impossible. So throughout this presentation, I'll give you tips on how to build out the plan, what to look for, and then things inside that plan as well. So basically, with the marketing plan, it provides you with that roadmap or that sort of playbook that helps you understand where you need to go and what you need to do to get there. So I always use a similar analogy too of a staircase. So if you start at the bottom of the staircase, it's harder to jump right to the top stair. So the top stair would be your end goal. So your yearly sales targets or how many customers you want to attract. It's harder to jump to the top, but if you take little steps along the way up the staircase, those are the little wins along the way, right? So it's easier to get to that final goal. Even though it's the same distance, it just may seem like it's easier to achieve. All right, so what is in a marketing plan? So no two marketing plans look the same, but they do share common themes and characteristics that make it considered a marketing plan. So this is sort of how we approach the term marketing plan here at Alchemy. So first and foremost, we identify your goals. So many of you have probably heard the term the SMART goal. So they should be specific, time-based, and measurable. So with that too, that's a huge thing to start with right off the bat, because if your goals are lofty or kind of way out of the sphere of expectation, then it's going to make it harder for you to achieve those results in your marketing plan, which could lead to discouragement, which could lead to a whole bunch of different things. So the first place to start is just make sure those goals are attainable, measurable, specific, time-based, and you sort of understand where you want to get to when you're identifying them. Understand and research your market. So what is the current trends? What is the data telling you? So that could go anywhere from just your current customer base, your current kind of how many products you've sold to this point, or how many customers you're seeing on a daily basis, or just even the demographic, what are the numbers? And it can go all the way, you can go even further to do the research in terms of, you could start doing surveys or kind of getting a better understanding of what people like, what are their interests, what are they into, their spending habits, their all the way up to their education background, their marital status. So there's research firms, and we do a little bit of the research component here at Alchemy as well, but that data really does tell you a lot of where you need to focus your marketing efforts as well as your marketing dollars. So define that audience. So who are you targeting and why? So use that research that I just talked about to really hone in. So one thing that I find that people do is they want to really target everyone. We want everyone out there to hear about this and everyone to come through our doors to purchase our products. But if you're targeting everyone, you might be missing on certain segments or not devoting enough time or energy into the ones that at the end of the day are your target market and will sort of dictate whether you're successful or not. So it's really about defining that audience, why are you targeting them, and using that research to back up. So analyze your competitors. This is a great point. So I know as business owners, we're all competitive in terms of that. So rather than kind of looking and say, oh, we got to beat the other guy, look what they're doing. Kind of even, I wouldn't even shy away from maybe partnering in some areas where you're all targeting the same audience. Maybe there's opportunity to partner, right? Whether it's in business or even when we work with other clients, such as not-for-profits, sometimes we create campaigns where a group of them all get together and because it's for the common goal, right? So as much as we can leverage that as well. So not only analyzing what they're doing, but also maybe build upon partnerships, it goes a long way. So evaluate your current approach. So what are we currently doing that's working? You might say, oh, nothing's working. Like, this is why we need the marketing plan. But if you look at those little wins and keep that staircase in your mind, you'll identify that there are little things. So maybe it's like, oh, we just launched and last month we only had 4 customers. Well, this month we have 6. Or so those are little wins along the way. It just goes a long way, and especially it builds to that. If your goals are lofty and you said, oh, we're going to kick off, we want 1,000 people right off the bat, then it looks harder to digest. But if it's smaller and attainable, then it makes a little bit more sense. So with that evaluation approach, what's working, what's missing, using that SWOT analysis, so that strength, weakness, opportunity, to really hone in on those strengths and also your weaknesses. So are there areas that you need to acknowledge for growth? Those can be used as marketing strategies as well. So it's really about understanding this at a granular level, about identifying your market, the goals, your weaknesses, strengths, opportunities, as well as threats. So threats can be anything to competitors, to kind of like the current landscape, business-wise, even the world landscape. So economics, right? Even what's happening in Russia, the whole COVID thing, those should all be identified as during your SWOT analysis as well, because they do have an effect. Are there any questions so far? Great. So continuing on that, what's in a marketing plan? So a big point to really key in on and focus on is understand your value. So what do you offer that's unique? So what is better than your competitors? And you might be thinking, well, we're very similar, but there's always those little things, and there's those little ways that we can use marketing and massage those words and key messages that, even though it may seem as it's not that different, we can make it seem that it is. And that's what we need to do. You really need to focus on what sets you apart from your competition. So in that, you'll start to be looking at strategies. So what tactics will we be using to reach those goals? So what evidence do you have to believe that these are the right strategies? So examples of that would be, maybe a tactic would be to engage local media because you're a new company, or you're focused on this niche area and you feel that that is a story that needs to be told. Or if it's a service, maybe there's something that's happening in the current news cycle that lends you to be a subject matter expert. So maybe an example would be if you run a yoga studio and you see that during the or there's a story out there that during the pandemic, more people went online to do online yoga classes, then you might see that and say, hey, did you know that we offer that here? And then it's just a snowball effect. You didn't spend anything from your marketing budget. It's all earned media, but it's just little ways to get ahead of that as well. And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead into a tactic, but it's just an example of what you can do in terms of strategies. And there's also, like, obviously Facebook ads, targeted messaging, targeted ads if you're in more of the digital space, but we can get to that in the further along in the presentation. So develop and create your key messages. A huge portion of this whole thing is just to really hone in on what you're trying to say. So stay on topic, stay on brand, and clarify the message of your service, your product, what you're trying to market, right? If it's a person, you can market people. It sounds kind of weird to do, but you just need to really hone in and key in on those messages. So we suggest no more than 3, because it's easy. It's hard to get that memory recall of anything over than that. So that goes in a few different ways. That's when we're building out our marketing or advertising plans, or when we're using our key messages when we're doing media interviews, right? It's always important to stay on point, stay on message. Sometimes you'll notice during an interview, if you're watching on TV or listening on radio or reading, you can almost pick out when they start going back to those key messages. They're referring back. It's like they'll answer the question, but it's like, oh, well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. But we're here today to talk about this, it's not a fluke. It's by design, right? So they're getting back to those key messages as well. So research your resources. So what tools or resources will you need or do you currently have to execute your strategy? So are you currently set up on the social media channels? Do you have a newsletter database? And we're talking more of the digital side of things. Do you have sort of like a key contact list of maybe media that you've met along the way, or just anything that you can kind of identify that you can use to really enhance your messaging and get that message out there? So what tools or resources do you have, and what resources or tools will you need? So do you need to engage a company like Alchemy to help with your strategy? Do you need to engage maybe a website designer or someone to really take your stuff to the next level? It's really about identifying and putting that down on paper as well. The last 2 points here, so define your timeline. So what is the expectations for execution? What are your milestones along the way? Is it, again, it's that staircase or that stair analogy. We'd all love to jump from the bottom all the way to the top and be, yay, we did it. But in reality, it does take time and there's a plan. So what does that look like? So create those milestones along the way. And it might sound kind of juvenile to say, oh, we did it in a week, but set those little milestones and celebrate them along the way, right? So it's always easier to celebrate, like I said, those smaller wins, those little successes, and it goes a long way for sure. And finally, make a plan for the evaluation. So how will you measure your results? So it's always, when we're first starting out, it's always good to get that baseline or that benchmark of where we were and where we want to go to. And you always want to be refreshing and looking at that data as you go along. So even when if you're fresh, start brand new marketing plan and have hardly any data, you start there. But then we start moving into maybe into 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 9 months, you'll routinely be updating and looking at those measures. So make a plan of how you measure. There's different tools and strategies, obviously, for when you're looking at certain tactics. So if you're measuring digital ads, there's Google Analytics, there's social analytics that you can look at, but it's really important. So whatever that number is, it's just important to look at that and be aware of what you're measuring. Okay, so in these next few slides here, we're going to take a bit of a closer look at the elements of the marketing plan of what I just sort of rattled off in the previous slides. So defining your audience. So as I mentioned, there are many tools and different strategies that you can use to understand and define your audience. A lot of these I mentioned before, but we can just run through them again. So they're including conducting customer surveys or focus groups, create customer personas. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but that's sort of identifying like your key customer. So sometimes we even put names to them. So it'd be like Joe Cool, who is 25 years old and lives in, this guy sounds kind of weird. He lives in his parents' basement and whatever, right? But it's just developing those personas that you can, again, use and identify to target. So if Joe Cool is the guy you're after, it's good to kind of create that persona for when you're building out those audience definitions. So define who your target audience isn't. So this is just as important as who your target audience is. You want to define who you don't want to, I wouldn't say waste time, but focus your energies on targeting. So if you're maybe in the business of, again, I'll use that yoga studio example. If you're in that and your kind of key demographic is at 25 to 54, then I wouldn't really focus your energy on maybe doing like seniors ads or if you're doing in ads in publications that are targeted toward that market. So it's really understanding who you don't want to reach, right? So evaluate your website and social analytics. So that's what I mentioned before about the tools around Google Analytics, and even with different content management systems for websites. They have backend data that you can look at and cultivate in mind to see how many people are visiting your site. So really evaluate what metrics you have and what they are telling you about your current website. And if you don't have that, then it's just one of those things that you will plan in of what you need, right? So utilize social listening and media monitoring. So this is a huge thing to really identify kind of those trends when you're looking at your business and what the audience is saying, and sort of their habits around their kind of purchasing habits, or even their habits in general, right? So you can utilize, there's different tools on social media where you can set up keywords to monitor and track. So you can set those up for your business, or you can set them up for even just if it's the term of that you want to search, or if it relates to kind of what your business is in, right? You can just search those and then you can see, it's good to track. So if you're starting to see an influx in maybe the area that you focus on, then maybe it might be time to, okay, well, if people are talking about it, let's get into that conversation. So identify those key hashtags, maybe target with some paid social ads. So it's really good to utilize those social tools. And then there's also tools around media monitoring. So, and it's really simple to do. You can even set it up on Google as a Google alert. So you just set up your search terms, and maybe you're just, if you wanted to Google, keep track on your business, you set up that Google search term and it'll actually send you alerts. If there's any time you're mentioned in the news, so the traditional media, so radio, television, online. So if anything's posted or said about those terms, you can get a Google alert to keep an eye on that as well. So that's, again, it's similar principles around the social. So if you're seeing a kind of a spike in your industry of what, or kind of your customer base based on how you identify the audience personas, then it's good to be aware. Then you can kind of insert yourself into that conversation. So talk to your team. What have they noticed about your customers? And this goes all the way, if you're a small business, all the way up to large. It doesn't matter. It's always good to hear about the experiences from the people on the ground, right? The boots on the ground term, because usually positive or negative, they're going to hear it first. So whether that's, again, a great customer experience, or usually if it's negative, they'll hear about it faster. They'll hear about that, but it's usually the people that are on the front lines or their day-to-day that are hearing this first. So engage them, get them excited about that. Again, it's kind of building those company champions, or those community champions, to really get behind your brand, and also kind of be your kind of ears to the ground, as well as just keeping an eye on how things are going as well. So engage them. What do they hear? What did they notice? And also tap into them for resources, even for ideas. It'd be like, well, what do you think we should do? So it's always good to get that feedback from your team. Okay, so defining your audience. So again, I mentioned here this target audience versus audience persona. So the data used to define the target audience includes the age, gender, education level, purchasing power, location, consumption habits. So that's kind of that start of the Joe Cool guy that I described. So example here would be more of that women 35-45, living in Lacombe County with a bachelor's degree, monthly income between $4,000 and $6,000. Versus the audience persona. So this is the profile of the buyers that would be your ideal customers. So the personas are the fictional characters that we really put those names to. So again, you can see this Mariana. It's really just a building block, or a build upon from the 35 to 45, right? So you're really building that out. So Mariana, 45, healthcare worker with a degree in nursing, lives in Lacombe, has 2 children and works part-time, is concerned about rising costs of living and paying off her mortgage, gets most of her recommendations from Facebook and word of mouth. So it's easier to understand. Like if you just read target audience and you're like 35-45, okay, woman between 4 and 6 grand, okay. But if you're putting almost like names and faces to your personas, then it's easier to understand and almost like okay, well, yeah, Mariana's going to come strolling through and I know exactly what she needs, right? So it's really about building out those personas. Not saying the target audience definition is bad, but it's just better to really beef up those personas as well. So why does this all matter? So I sort of touched on, and you kind of get where I'm going with this, but once you understand your audience, you can better understand how to reach them. So again, that example with Mariana, you know what she wants, what she likes, dislikes. You can tailor your marketing communications to reach that, address her needs, and be strategic about it, right? So 4 questions to ask yourself when defining those audience, either the demographics, the personas. So what are their biggest, few things here, what are their biggest problems, their difficulties, and desires? So we sort of identified those with Mariana there, right? The 2 kids trying to pay off debts. So those are all intertwined. So it's good to identify the problems, difficulties, and desires of your audience personas. Second point is, where do they look for information? So in that audience persona, we identify that Mariana is more of the social. She gets her info from Facebook. So maybe if that's the persona we wanted to target, we develop a social media strategy. If there was another one that maybe is okay, where our audience are more, they tend to listen to more of that terrestrial radio, CBC radio. Okay, well, let's maybe look into earned media or paid media on those platforms. So it's really important to identify where your audience is going for the information they're consuming. That can go all the way from ads to news to whatever they're looking for, right? The third point here is, how does your product or service solve their problem? So what's it going to do for Mariana? So you really need to identify that and key in on how you pitch or how you promote your product to those key audiences. It's one thing to identify them, but the next step is really, okay, well then, what are we solving that makes their lives easier? So maybe with that persona, we identified the childcare issue. Maybe it's something, so we start maybe crafting messaging around, we understand that being a parent is hard. Well, this is what we will do. And you're just tidying it up and tailoring that service to what that problem is for the consumer or the customer. And then who do they trust? This kind of goes back to that research. So it'd be great if they're already a trusted follower of your brand, or they already visit your establishment or location, or they're already participating and using your services. That's huge. You've built that trust, so it's just about maintaining that, right? In those personas, it's good to also research, well, do they trust, what other brands are they looking at? Are they more of the high, they really trust the kind of the super brands, or are they more of that down home mom and pop trust feeling? They care about where their products come from. They care about the environment. They care about maybe local. So if you identify that, maybe that's right what you're doing. So you can key in and tie in your marketing to really hone in on the trust of your customers and consumers. Okay, little exercise, and don't worry, if you don't feel that you have to participate, but it's encouraged. We can run through it regardless of if we hear any thoughts or feedback, but let's just a quick little one here. So using the residents of Lacombe County, create a target audience and maybe an audience persona for one of the following hypothetical municipal projects. So the first one is the creation of a new mixed-use land development project that includes green space, offices, and retail. And the second one, a controversial new wastewater treatment facility being built in an established community made up primarily of seniors. So which one did you guys want to do? Maybe Jaylene, did you want to pick one, or?
Monica volunteered.
Okay. That is not true, but I will try my best. So because I am focusing on economic development, I'll go with the first one.
Okay, perfect. So the creation of a new mixed-use land development project that includes green space, offices, and retail. All right, yes. So right off the top, who do you think that this I guess in your audience persona, who do you think this is best catered to, just in using your kind of background knowledge of the residents of Oak Homes? So who would be who are we gearing this project towards?
Well, business owners,
Okay.
I would say, like if part of the goal is like marketing new office and retail space, that would be one target audience for sure.
Okay. What about the people using it?
If there's green spaces, maybe outdoorsy people, maybe outdoorsy businesses, environmental, people with environmental interests. I don't
People with families.
Yep, maybe a community, maybe people who are really engaged in community kind of meeting space, or they kind of like that outdoorsy would be the for sure. Anything else?
I mean, then there's also people that would shop at the retail businesses. So it kind of includes a little bit of everybody.
Yep, totally. So who would not be in the target audience?
I don't know, because seems like everyone shops, right?
Yeah, or the green spaces, like I was gonna say, you know, younger people, but even teens have a lot of disposable income because they don't have other expenses.
Yeah,
so they shop, hang out in parks.
This one's a little bit of a trick. It's kind of a curveball, because it's like, and you said it right off the bat, well, everyone shops. Well, they do, but do we want to target everyone? Remember, it kind of goes back to what you were saying. So with this, maybe we identify that this mixed use land development projects, and I know this is very vague, but maybe some of the businesses and retail are geared towards that 25 to 55 demographic. So do we want, even though there's parks and stuff, do we want to target seniors, right? Do we want them to, like, it'd be great if they use it, but is that our target, right? So it's just, just developing and thinking in those target audiences. So yeah, like we're well on our way to developing that persona of who we want to use this new mixed use land development project, right? So the biggest thing is just, and that there's a reason why we say that, and we put this one in there, and not saying, well, everyone shops or everyone goes to work, or, well, yes and no, right? So it's just really about targeting who we want to focus on. Does anyone have any questions?
It makes sense. I think if it was split up, right? Like if it wasn't mixed use and you're just doing one about a park, maybe you have a slightly different answer, or specific kinds of offices or specific kind of retail.
Yeah, because it's hard sometimes, right? Because obviously when you're proposing these new projects, like, again, it is kind of going to that. They want to get everything in for everybody. So we're going to throw in a park, we're going to put office space, we're going to do this, that, but there's levels to those as well, right? So even in the eyes of the developer, or when we're green lighting these projects, it's like, well, we really want the retail space to be the most, not popular, but the one that's really driving it, right? So it's, again, just understanding those audiences and those personas around it. So the wastewater one's fun too, but we can maybe save that for another day. Awesome.
Feel free to unmute yourselves, participants, if you want to speak.
Okay, so making the most out of your social media. So some of you may or may not be on social platforms, or you just kind of do it not really relating to your business, but these next few slides are really talking about the essentials of how we can leverage social media. When I first started with CBC, we were kind of on the cusp of, it was when Facebook was really just getting going and Twitter was a new thing, and Facebook was just really about just connecting with friends and playing that game Farmville. I don't know if anyone remembers that, where it's just this online game, but And then people have this bright idea that we can make money at this stuff. So then that's when you started to see the advent of Facebook ads and really targeting around. It's quite crazy how deep you can get in terms of looking at your target audience on social. So social media is the #1 channel that business owners have, and businesses in general have, to connect directly with their customers. So by leveraging the story, everything we talked about of that plan, so the story, the values, your strategy around that, and in this is content pillars, and we'll get into that later into the slides, but what are we leveraging on social? So using those emerging trends, how can our business create that engaging content that brings them those consumers and customers? So just a few stats here. So 3.96 billion, so almost 4 billion social media users are currently on the platforms right now in 2022. So 33 million in Canada, which is crazy to me how interconnected we are. And we're seeing, I mean, there's positives and negatives to that, right? So, but that's where people are. So let's meet them there. So Canadians on average spend about 1.46 or 1.5 hours on social media daily. So whether they're keeping in contact with relatives, they're just some people use it as a way to get news, good, bad, or indifferent. They do. So how are we if we wanted to, and we identified that we need to target them, how are we doing it? So 30.65 million Canadians are using social media on mobile devices. So these guys, cell phones are huge, right? So, and I don't know, it's kind of crazy how targeted you can get. So sometimes you might notice, oh, I was just talking about buying a couch and I got an ad for friggin' a couch on Google. Well, I don't know if it's quite there yet, but it's close, where they'll target where you are. They can kind of look at your spending habits. So I'm not saying we need to all be intrusive and get that level of detail into this, but it is definitely out there and happening for sure. So some best practices when we're looking at social media. So consistency wins the day. If your company only posts sporadically, so once a month or here and there, if there's a flurry of posts and then nothing for 2 months, it's really risking your reputation. And it seems like you're sort of disorganized or you're out of touch. You're not focused on your customers. You're not engaging, right? Match your business with your social platform. So at a time everyone's like, we need Facebook page, we need a Twitter account, we need this, we need that. Well, if your customers aren't on Facebook, then why are we wasting our energies, right? So it's really choosing those platforms strategically. So an example here, so if you're in the B2B space, LinkedIn will be critical. So the business to consumer, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, those are more likely to connect. So really identify what channels you want to be on, or maybe you don't even have to have a Facebook page, right? So it's really identify about where you want to be. Again, those competitors, understand how they're using the platforms. Maybe there's opportunity to partner and team up as well, but just understand what they're doing. How often are they posting? What's their content looking like? Can we do better? So it's just really analyzing those competitors as well. And then the content pillars, as I mentioned. So choose a set of topics or themes that you create as the foundation for your overall content. So if you identified that there's 2 pillars for your content pillars, one is more targeted towards maybe your audience persona, and then the second pillar is more general awareness. You build those pillars into the topics that are relevant to your target audiences, right? So it's really good to be strategic and build that content out rather than just throwing stuff out there. Oh, we need to post that on Facebook. We need to get this on our account. Well, does it really fit? Is it just a waste of time? Is it kind of futile? So really think about what you're posting. Visual. It's crucial. So include visual components. So either, and this lends itself to different platforms, but like TikTok, Instagram, so custom videos or images, they're up to 5 times more likely to drive engagement. So it's good to just post, if you just post generic text and that's it, it's okay, but you're missing out on a huge number of potential customers as well and engagement. Lean into that data. So as I mentioned before, when we're defining and finding that data, lean into it. So most social platforms offer a number of tools internally. Like you don't even need a external account or software to find the insight of where your posts are going, or who's liking your stuff, or who is retweeting or sharing. So it's really about understanding that data, and we can support like companies like Alchemy. We offer training, like a seminar on how to understand social data, right? So it's leveraging that data so we can hone in, again, just strategic, right? Creating evergreen content. So this is content that you can be routinely using over time. So it's relevant for a long period of time. It helps to kind of be used during times that maybe you haven't identified much to share or get out there. So rather than just not post for a month or two, you have this evergreen content that you can schedule sporadically throughout your posting schedule. That so it keeps it fresh. It keeps you're engaged. So it just maintains that activity on your social channels. And engage in the conversation. So depending on your industry or your business, it's important to stay relevant and communicate with your customers. So stay on top of current events related to those pillars. So I'm not saying weigh in on COVID or things that are in the news, because then we might get into crisis very fast, right? So, but weigh in on the current events that are relevant to those pillars that you identified. And then also make your social presence interactive. There's a whole social media is a two-way street. So rather than just pushing out messaging, it's also important to respond. Or if someone asks a question, you're replying. Or if you notice that someone is liking all your stuff, maybe call them out and say, hey, thank you so much for following us. And it's customers like you that help us. Like, just engage with your audience on social. So these next slides here go into all sorts of details, and you can use them for social strategies, for website, for blogs, for paid media, earned media, ad strategies. It's really about telling that story. So developing that content. How do we develop it? How do we tell that effective story? So the term for that, what I just said there, is basically content marketing. So content marketing is the development and distribution of relevant, useful content. So whether it be blogs, newsletters, case studies, to current or potential customers. So businesses with blogs usually get about just under 70% more leads than other companies. And the reason why is because they're engaged, right? They're relevant. They're staying on top of what's important to their customer base. So some clients that we currently work with have all different sorts of blog post schedules. Some do one a month, some do 2 a month, some do 1 every 3 months. So it's really about honing in what you want to achieve, when you want it to get that out there based on your audience personas, and really leveraging that, right? So another quick number and stat here is 47% of the buyers view 3 to 5 pieces of content before engaging with a sales representative. So they might see your blog or an ad, or maybe a story that you managed to get in the local newspaper before even making that call or engaging. So it's just really, it's important to keep that regularity up. So not only with social, but even in your campaign. So you might run a campaign and then it's gone, or it wasn't really successful, but don't abandon. Like, don't just say, oh, we're done. Like, continue on, right? Because it's just a process you need to work at. So companies that use content marketing see approximately 30% higher growth rates than businesses not using it. So part of that is they're telling a story. They're within that content marketing, they're identifying how they are solving the problems of their customer base, or those personas, right? So it's really important to leverage that and get that out there in the market. So 72% of business or business to business marketers say that content marketing increases engagement and the number of leads they generate. So speaking to peers, right? Building those partnerships, sharing the content from you might even see them as competitors, but maybe sharing LinkedIn posts or Facebook posts, engaging in different ways. You can go all the way down There's different tactics that maybe you do, like a Reddit Ask Me Anything with a fellow business owner, and then you're both kind of engaging and focusing on your audiences. But it's really about, again, not just eliminating if they're competition or if they're playing in the same sandbox. It's really engaging with them and sharing and working together. So as I mentioned before about the importance of key messages and understanding that. So this is crucial basically in everything when we're talking about marketing. So it's the key messages are essential in that they're information that you want your audience to hear and you need them to hear, understand, and remember. So they're short, sweet, articulate. So that's what I meant by no more than 3, and you keep them nice, tight, and concise. So we'll all probably remember maybe catchy taglines or jingles or whatever, right? So there's reasons why they're tight. They're nailing the audience personas. They're easy for people to understand and remember. So why do we need them? So it's more than just creating that crazy catchy earworm or that tagline that's stuck in anyone's head, but they need that. They need to hear the same message because it's trust. It builds that consistency. It goes all the way back to what I mentioned, trust, and right off the bat, it's if you're consistent, you're saying the same message, there's no doubts. They know what they're getting. They trust you, they know. So it's almost like that, example of like McDonald's. Like you might have heard this before. If you buy a Big Mac in Calgary and a Big Mac in Japan, a Big Mac's a Big Mac. They may have different item menus that are relevant to the area that they're in, but that there's consistency there, right? So it's trust. Not saying we all need to be McDonald's, but there's a reason why that they are where they are, for sure. Okay, so maybe this one's for like Jaylene, and we can kind of key in on this, but maybe let's just take some time to maybe identify 3 key messages for Lacombe County and maybe share with the group. Or if we want to create a fictitious company and develop some short, quick ideas, we can do that too. All right, well, that's okay. We don't have to, we can talk a little bit more key messages after in the wrap up, but that's, we don't have to do every exercise. That's perfectly fine. We'll just jump right into the next section here. So we're going to be talking, again, this kind of goes back into the website component. So many of you might have heard the terms of SEO or when we're talking like kind of Google and website, you might have heard, well, we need SEO. We need to be optimized for Google. Well, what that basically stands for is search engine optimization. So it's how you make your business more searchable online. And we actually, this is one area that Alchemy does quite well when we work with our client groups, is that we identify, again, it kind of goes back to those personas of what areas to target and what not to target. So what keywords do we want to focus on and what do we want to stay away from? So good SEO practices allow you to increase the quantity and the quality of your organic search results and drive traffic to your website. So research shows us that over 60% of the traffic from Google goes to the first 3 results, and that's based on optimized, just really honed in SEO. So creating that quality content, as I mentioned before, the blogs, articles, FAQs, resources, anything that's living online on your sites, using those research predetermined keywords and phrases that resonate with your potential customers, it goes a long way. So that's basically what it means by building strong SEO. So if you identified a term that resonates with your customer base or your business offering, make sure that you're including that in the blogs, in the articles, in FAQs. So the more you're using those terms, the more people who might be searching directly for that will see it, and even indirectly, there's algorithms that adjust to that, and you will see that. So that's why if you routinely search similar things, you're going to get like the top 3 ones. They might change a little bit in terms of order, but they're always at that top, right? So it's really, again, it's just optimizing those search terms. So driving back to that, so your website must be user-friendly and mobile friendly to really get good use out of this SEO. So you might have heard of terms like meta descriptions or like alt image text. Like sometimes maybe, I don't know, the experience of some people have with uploading images to their website, but there's always sections like, do you want to add alt image text? What that is it goes to the SEO, right? So if it's an image, say, of your product, well, maybe you identify it. You might use it in the meta descriptions, but maybe there's more you can use to identify that, right? So if you're selling clothing, so maybe it's a coat, brown coat, whatever, like you just build those out. So it's one thing to get this solid right off the bat, but it is good to update and maintain. So again, based on the research, just kind of what are the terms that are going out there in your industry, in your business, that we might need to implement into SEO. All right, so this next slide, or this next group of slides here, sort of go kind of hand in hand into what I just sort of talked about with SEO. So the essentials of digital marketing. So what does that look like? So digital marketing, what is it? Why does it matter? So basically what it is it's marketing on sort of the platforms that I just mentioned. So your social media, your online-based technologies, internet, anything that is kind of in that digital space. So digital marketing uses those as a way to promote, advertise products and services. So I'm sure we're all familiar. We might get annoyed with how many Facebook ads we see sometimes, or even Google, or you might see you're targeted, or even sometimes I've seen like, why am I getting this? Like, it's totally irrelevant. What that is, it's just poorly researched, either kind of targeting on social ads or even SEO, right? So like, it's just not hitting the mark, right? So for example, think about a year ago, I got like ads for big and tall clothing, men's big and tall clothing. Like I'm 5'9", I'm anything but big and tall, right? So it's just like, what the heck? Why am I getting this? So, so you really want to strategically target those keywords to reach the right and the correct target demographics. So there's a few different ways. Your ad can appear at the very moment someone is looking for products, or it can come up related to keywords that they might be searching at any given time. So creating and implementing the successful digital marketing campaigns, again, it goes all the way back to what I first brought up with that planning, that research, understanding your market, understanding who you do and don't want to target. And it just goes a long way. And not only it helps your business, but it also builds the consumer audience of who you're trying to attract. The more you understand, the more you know who to target as well. So this last point here, and I'll just kind of put a little bit of a disclaimer, caveat. Like, I understand, like, we all want to spend a huge amount of money on marketing, right? Sometimes it just isn't in the plans, but there are ways, and I kind of show this further on, where a small amount can definitely go a long way. And it's just identifying the goals and what we want to try to achieve. So if you're not investing even zero, you're potentially losing out on hundreds, if not thousands, of leads on a daily basis. So it might be daunting, and you might be, well, wow, we just don't have the budget, or we don't have the time, or it's just, again, it's about setting those goals and those expectations around what you want to achieve. So some of the basics around digital marketing and what I talked about earlier were the Google search. So those are really using those keywords for your business or organization. So it's targeted. So if you are in the health and wellness, maybe your words are more driven, your keywords are driven to that industry. So you really want to use those when you're building your SEO. So even in your Google ad space, your Google ads as well. So it's using those keywords that are associated with what you're trying to get out there. So and I won't touch on this because we can go all day on this, but just how it works. But basically again, to people, sometimes might get confused. They're like, well, running all these ads, when do we pay? So you only pay when your ad is clicked on, right? So you might hear this price per click, or there's terminology around auctions and bidding and all that. That's basically what that is. But we could spend a whole whole content presentation on that, and we do. So there'll be a list of kind of what we offer at the end of the slide, but it's a good one to definitely be aware of as well. And that being said, same thing for Google Display. So it shows images of ads or image ads on articles, videos, or websites that consumers browse. So you might see those on the sidebar. Right now, the network of that is around just 2 million websites that reach over 90% of internet users. So it's basically what it is when those ad space is available on a website, you're placing those ads in real time. Again, as I mentioned, those auctions, so against other bidders. So you can imagine if you're trying to get on a really high traffic site, you're going to be spending more. But if maybe you identified that this site, maybe it's not as high traffic overall, but for your market and your area, it's the best website in town. Maybe that's the one you focus on, right? And finally, social media. So platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, they allow you to target many specific audiences based on stuff in the profile. So when you enter like your education, your job, your location, some of the stuff you like, your life events, right? So when you say married, well, you can target that. When you say parents, you can target that. So anything when you click on those little, oh yeah, I like fishing. Well, maybe Cabela's is targeting you and you're getting all these ads because you like fishing, right? So it's just be mindful of that as well as the consumer on the flip side. Yeah. So anything you put on Facebook or you can be targeted as well, but it's good information to have for sure. And this kind of goes what I mentioned about the small amount, and we can kind of get into that. Like there's sometimes we've spent $50 and we've seen increase in what we try to achieve. So it's just really understanding that budget, because even small spends can definitely see the powerful results. So this next slide is basically kind of a rundown of what I was just talking about the budgets of what we see in terms of return on investment when it comes to social ads. So this first column here, we had a budget of $50. We ran the campaign for 2 weeks. The objective of this was to gain traffic to the client's website. So the ROI that we saw was 62 link clicks, just under 4,000 people reached, which means you're reaching that audience on the platform, and then 195 average daily impressions. So that's, again, sometimes when we're talking social, it's may have seen, could have seen, but that's the daily impressions data around that. And again, we can get deeper into further. If you have questions, you can email me after, but that's sort of what we're talking about when we're looking at that. The second point here is the budget of $250. We ran for 2 weeks, and this was more of an awareness campaign. So maybe not clicking directly through to a website, but raising awareness on maybe a service or maybe a campaign that we were running at the time. And you can see that just the numbers of reach alone, just over 100,000 people reached with just under 10,000, so 8,000 average daily impressions. So you can see, obviously, when it is going up, the numbers are high, but there's still not, you're still getting return with the $50 investment as well. And then same being said for the 150. Again, it all just relates to your traffic and objectives. And then bottom there with the 350. So you can see that the numbers, even though it's a jump from 250 to 350, the numbers aren't that difference in terms of the reach. When we're looking in different campaigns, obviously we can hone in. This was an amazing total impressions based on the data. So it's really about honing in, and I know exactly why this happened. It's just those keywords are really tightened up and the interests were solid, right? So that's sort of why we're seeing numbers like that. But as you can see, you're not spending thousands of dollars. It's manageable for sure. All right, so media relations. I briefly touched on this earlier on when we were talking about building those relationships with local media and how we sort of engage if we find that there's a story to be told about your business or your organization or your service. So how do we engage? So most people, they might hear media and there's intimidation there. It's like, I don't want to talk to a reporter. I'm camera shy, or I'm nervous. I'm this, that, and the other thing. But it's really important to at least identify and learn about why we do need it or we don't, right? So media relations is basically the work of proactively reaching out to media for the purpose of informing the public of an organization's mission, policies, practices, business, if we're relating to businesses, the business offerings, or again, as I mentioned in the earlier example, responding to maybe something that's a current event in a consistent and credible manner. So again, that yoga example, if you can be seen as the subject matter expert on that, then they might be calling you every time there's a yoga story, right? So that's great for your brand awareness. That's great for the credibility, for the building that trust. So the goal of media relations is to maximize that positive coverage without paying for it. So you're not buying it through ads. So maybe these great stories are there that will result in that impact, but you're not paying a cent. You're leveraging the media to tell these great stories. So maybe, and this can go all the way back to maybe you have an employee who has an amazing story, right? That you can use. And obviously if maybe they've been with you since day one or they're working, if it relates to the story and it fits into kind of what you're trying to do, then you can definitely leverage it as well. So not only will earned media typically have a better return on investment compared to traditional ads, but there's research to suggest that it's seen as more credible. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I read, if I'm reading a story in the newspaper and you can see like this advertorial content, this has been paid for, but well, it's like, oh, they paid for this. So it's like you're automatically kind of set up that there's a little bit of a red flag where it's just an ad. Whereas if it's a story that's included in the publication or on radio, TV, then it's building up that credibility with the audience who are also your consumers. So ads are good, but it's also, you really want to leverage that earned media as well. And when we say the term earned, it's just you're earning it, you're not buying it. So you're sending a news release, you're maybe calling a reporter, you're pitching your idea. That's what the term earned media stands for. So media can help you effectively tell your story. It demonstrates your values and it connects your products, your services to the current events. So that, again, that kind of ties into my example. If you can tie in your brand or your service or your company to that, then it's like sort of that recognition, right? There's a brand, a recognition amongst the audience and the consumer that builds that trust and credibility. So within media relations, there's a few key points that I just want to spend a bit of time talking about. So we touched on media monitoring. So what that is, so basically what it is you're keeping your ears open, your eyes open to what's currently happening in media. It's going a little bit beyond kind of the news of the day. That's obviously everyone's going to hear about. It's maybe flipping through a few pages or scrolling down a few scrolls on the website or clicking through through different links and news stories. It's just really finding what might be in the media landscape and out there that we can either proactively respond to if it's an opportunity or even if it's a threat. So maybe that there's a story that's negatively reflecting on your industry as a whole, or maybe directly on your business, then we should be aware of potential opportunities and threats. So media monitoring basically goes a long way to do that. So how do we do media monitoring? So what does that look like? So it sort of ties back to that, even similarly to the SEO, right? So it's all based on keywords, regions, people, competitors related to the brand. So you can, again, as I mentioned before, you can set up Google alerts around these. So if you identified keywords, areas that you want to target, you can set it up that way. There's other media monitoring platforms and software that you can actually purchase that goes a little bit deeper. And that's more for larger brands or larger companies where you're maybe wondering what's happening in maybe other provinces or even other areas, other maybe in the States, stuff like that. So it's just a little bit of a deeper dive and a little bit more than just the Google alerts that you could set up on your own. So considering how and where you connect with your audience to identify those challenges and issues, you need to basically, that's another step of media monitoring. So why are we trying to connect with the people that are maybe reading an article about this event or this area? Do we need to rebuild that trust? Do we need to continue that trust? Are they a potential customer? Are they a former customer that you want to get back? So it's just being mindful of where people are and how they're consuming their news. So identifying those thought leaders, influencers, government reps, and ambassadors. So if maybe you're closely tied to one of those areas or those people, maybe set up a media monitoring search to see how they're playing out in the media landscape. If you maybe are associated with a high ranking political official and maybe they're in some hot water, then that might trigger a crisis scenario, right? So it's really about monitoring that. And on the flip side, it could be positive. Maybe you identified that they did some groundbreaking ceremonies with other businesses that are similar to yours, or other jurisdictions, other municipalities. Maybe, oh, hey, we're going to be doing this next month, right? Or just stuff like that. So it's just, the more you know about what's happening, it's easier to connect with, for sure. And then the same being said for blogs, Twitter handles, just anyone that maybe you've identified that are similar in your business or area of work, follow. Search doesn't hurt, for sure. And then the last sort of that, or on this slide, the last one that's mainly the more traditional is, and everyone's heard of this, is the press release. So it's basically that official statement that's sent to media outlets or members of the media with, you're providing your key messages, your information, you're creating, maybe it's an official announcement, it's directed to the public. So maybe it's more of that official statement from your business, company, municipality, not-for-profit, and it's directed specifically for an event or a larger scale campaign. So it really requires that specific, there's formatting around press releases, there's style guides around that. That's a service we offer, is press release creation, distribution, monitoring, follow up with that. But it's really, that's your kind of the general and the most trusted way when you're trying to connect with media. So these next 2 points sort of go to the steps of the next, right? So when maybe you've secured that media coverage, or maybe you're monitoring things and then something pops up that deserves your attention. So the first point is media training, and it's something that we provide our clients as well. So it's basically preparing and engaging your spokespeople and training them to be confident and better prepared for interviews. So it's honing in on those key messages. It's building confidence when they're speaking to media. It's not getting flustered by potential kind of curveball questions. It's managing the message and controlling that what you're trying to get across. Because it goes all the way back to that first point that we made way back on slide 2 or 3 about building that trust, right? So if you come across maybe in an interview as not trustworthy, or you're perceived as shifty, or you're not seen as telling the truth, and that can go a long way as to damaging your brand, or kind of eroding your credibility amongst your audience. And I know I just kind of briefly mentioned that, but as I mentioned, we do offer media training, and you can get deep into it. So again, there's some information on that at the end of the presentation if you wanted to kind of explore that as well. And then crisis comms planning. So we always use this term. It's not sort of if a crisis is going to happen, it's when. And when I say crisis, I'm not talking like the worst case scenario, but even smaller things could be just as detrimental and be perceived as reputational hits to your brand. So it's really important to plan and be prepared for when that happens. So it could even, and it kind of ties into everything. It could be as a result of a poor media interview. It could be as a result of posting something on social that maybe wasn't well thought out, or responding to a comment, or just something that goes all the way back to that planning and really targeting and honing in, right? So the crisis comms planning is no different. So it's, again, detailed planning on how you will respond to events that potentially impact your business or company negatively. Again, and it goes all the way back to that trust. So some examples of that. So basically, when looking at the crisis scenarios, you want to include things and again, this is the worst case. So like employee fatalities, or maybe there's a product recall, or a cancellation campaign against your business. So that could be more of the social media. It's like the CEO said this and now everyone is against the company, right? It could even be seen as like smaller things, like a data breach for maybe a handful of customers or internally. So it doesn't have to always go to the worst case doom and gloom scenario. It could be smaller things that you just need to identify. And when we do the crisis comms planning, we talk a lot in risk scenarios and plotting things out on a chart. So when we do those scenarios in training, we use a lot of color coding. So red, green, yellow. So obviously we know it's based on stoplights. So red's bad, green we're in the manageable, yellow is potential, right? So it's plotting stuff like that. It's really exciting stuff, to be honest with you, when you get deep into the crisis side of things and looking at what might be an issue or what's considered an issue versus a risk and all that stuff. So again, we can spend all the time we want on that, but it's just really important to identify. Because like I said, it's not if something happens, it's when. So the biggest one here, and we're talking all about these different things, and it's almost like, well, yeah, these are great to have, but what is it getting me? What do I see? What am I return? So these next few points in these few slides here kind of look into that measuring that return on the marketing investment and how to really understand that at a higher level right now for the purpose of this presentation. So what is ROI? So basically, it's the performance measure used to evaluate the profitability of the investment. So in this situation, it's marketing. So how does it directly measure to the amount of return relative to the investment? It's really essential to measure that, to know and to understand if our marketing initiatives are working. If you don't measure that, then it's like you don't know. You might assume that it's performing fantastic, or maybe you're seeing a slight uptick and you're thinking it's working, but if you're not really going deeper and understanding that based on your ROI, based on the investment, then you could be missing some areas or some spots that you wanted to tweak or adjust along the way. That being said, there's no one size fits all when it comes to determining that return on investment. So it's a little bit tricky. If there was, then it'd be easy to do and say, yep, we spent this, we got this, perfect. Or we spent this, got this, didn't work, go back. Like, it's hard. Again, it goes all the way back to that data and those analytics. And as you can see in these next 3 points, it's sort of, I'm kind of speaking of what I talked about before about measuring and measurement, but really keeping an eye on those social media engagement numbers. So the likes, the follows, the comments, the impressions. Sometimes you might hear, we have 50 likes. Well, what does that mean? Like, is that good? 50 to one person might be great. 50 to another might be low. So it's really understanding what that number looks like. Web traffic. So really diving into that. So unique visits to your website. So is it maybe you launched a campaign and you're seeing this huge influx in unique visits. So that's sort of telling you that you can tie it directly to that initiative. Where's your traffic coming from? So maybe if you set up some Google ads, you would identify that those are coming directly from that. So it's just really diving into that data and saying, hey, yeah, like our ROI on our Google ad campaign was great. We had this number of web traffic and maybe 60% of it was from Google, or 80% of it, right? Whatever you deem as a successful number to track. And all these Google Analytics, many of you may have heard, but they can be built right into your website or into social media to really measure that ROI. Are there any questions? Okay, so we're coming sort of close to the end here, but some final tips about just basically kind of staying top of mind. So what do we need to do to elevate? You might have heard all this and saying, well, this is a lot to take in. I'd love to do this, but I just don't have the time. The salesman in me will say, well, Alchemy can help you support and we can do that, but sometimes that's just not feasible and possible. So there are tips and little things you can do to understand how you can make an impact, not only in your brand, but if you do take that next step into the marketing initiatives, what can you do to stay top of mind and what can you do to elevate your brand? So whether it's a service, a business, municipality, whether it's not-for-profit, what can you do to basically elevate what you're working at every day? So the first point, and I've touched on it throughout the presentation, is really understand what your customers' first interactions with your brand looks like. What are you building? Like, what do you want? They say that first impression is everything. Well, it's true. It relates to people, it relates to brands, it relates to everything. So really step back and view your brand, your service, your offering through the eyes of your customers. So again, through the eyes of those audience personas, through the eyes of maybe the people you don't want to target. That's just as important. So how are you coming across to the people that you don't want to be seen as you're ignoring people, but at the same time, maybe that's an opportunity to explain, well, this might not be the right service. Maybe you go here, whatever, right? It's just understanding those audiences and looking at it through the views of your customers. Build that exceptional experience with your customers. So create those memorable experiences that maybe someone posts on social or someone writes a Google review or a Yelp review. If you're a restaurant, maybe it's a review along those lines. But really build out those experiences with your customers, because that's just as powerful as any paid ad, or it's word of mouth, right? It goes a long way. On the flip side, negativity goes a long way too. So if you're not creating that experience, or if you're kind of focused on other things and you're not really caring about the brand experience, then that could be a detriment to your business as well. Build those brand advocates, build those brand champions, maybe build those internal champions. So if it's even staff, build those as your de facto spokespeople, not from a media side of things, but just they rave about you to their friends, family, maybe they go to the gym and they say, hey, you know what? Well, this happened at work today. This was awesome. So just building in those internal champions as well. Stay true to the brand. So be open, authentic, and just be whoever you say you are in your key messages. You have to live it. You have to exemplify those traits, right? So, because that's the first thing that people will key in on, is if you're not living up to those standards, if you're not following that tagline that you said you are, if you say that customer service is number one and it's zero, if in the eyes of a personal customer experience, then you got a lot of work to do, and it's hard to rebuild that trust, right? So stay true to it. And that being said, it's identifying that right off the bat of what you want to be and what you want to achieve, right? So transparency gains trust. It's easy. It's three little words right there, but if people can see that you're honest, you're open, you're authentic to who you are, whatever your business is, it goes a long way in building that customer trust, and also leveraging your audience personas as you do more research and even targeting different areas as well. So the next point here is humanize your brand. So this sort of goes to those brand champions and those brand advocates. If there's stories that you can tell that utilize real people, I encourage you to do that. If there's campaigns that are maybe focused on staff or owners, or just something that people can really, the realness of it, right? Because that might, depending on your line of work or depending on your industry, that might trigger something. If you're telling a story and it's a challenge that person faced or solved or worked with, the person on the other end might be experiencing the exact same thing. And if they see a face and they see a real person who did it, it's easier for them to maybe engage with your business. It's one thing to say, we help people every day. But if you have that person, and again, I'm kind of going to the not-for-profit area, but if you have that, maybe that person that you've helped along the way and engage and help share that story, it goes a long way. It's not, those words are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every story should just be people, but it supplements and it complements that content as well. And connect with your audience through story. So I mentioned it before about social media. It's not just about pushing out that message. It's hearing the feedback. It's responding. It's creating that narrative maybe with your social audience. Again, maybe you're taking something you saw on social and maybe you're creating a whole in-person event or campaign based on some of that. So it's really connecting that audience, connecting them through story, connecting them through the common challenges that you've identified way back at the beginning about your brand marketing plan and what you want to achieve. And it's really, again, it's about staying true to that brand and who you are as a company or organization. So as I mentioned, these are just some further resources that you can dive into after my presentation. We have a ton of blogs on our website that basically talks about all of this. So including free resources, we have recordings of webinars we've done in the past. We also offer free workshops in various marketing and communications topics. So basically everything I talked about, we either offer a workshop on it or email me and we can probably put one together, because it's there's definitely room to talk about all these things, right? And generally our workshops are right around the same time, so about an hour and a half to 2 hours that we put together for you guys. So yeah, if there's, I'll send a link or I'll send a link to Jaylene that maybe distribute direct links to those resources after we're done here. So as I mentioned before, there was a few different tools that I talked about that can help you out in certain areas. So when we're talking about analytics or scheduling or monitoring, these are just a few here that we use with our client base. So these can help you in your marketing efforts. Again, I mentioned they can go all the way from monitoring to data analytics to newsletters, reach, audience reach. So the tools are Hootsuite. So that's basically a scheduling platform for social media. And it also, there's some monitoring and analytics as well built into it. MailChimp, it's a newsletter distribution as well as database management system. So some of you might be using this as a newsletter distribution service. It's great. There's obviously with all these, there's different tiers and levels of plans you can sign up for, but even the base level is pretty good, and it achieves a lot of what you're trying to reach. Meltwater. So Meltwater it's a little bit more pricey in terms of media monitoring. It's designed for maybe those larger organizations that, but it runs the gamut. It covers everything. So it monitors traditional media, social media, radio, television, online. You can set up service where you can actually capture the clip from a TV broadcast and share with whether it's senior management or if you're at that level, right? So yeah, that's a great one as well. Grammarly, so it's a relatively newer one. So it's basically a writing tool that helps you edit grammar, spelling, and writing quality. So it's an online website tool. So you just copy and paste, plug in your content, and it'll kind of give you recommendations. And it's like a beefed up auto or kind of spell check for those familiar with Word. So it really helps you out in that regard. It'll even, if you want to sound more confident, you can click a little button and it'll replace words that might make you sound not as confident. So it'll help you out just depending on what type of content or how you're trying to sound in your written content as well. Canva. I don't know how many are familiar with that, but it's a design platform for basic graphic design. So it's just really amazing how much you can actually do online these days in terms of when it comes to marketing and PR and graphic design. So Canva is a user-friendly platform that's very basic. It has a bunch of templated things for everything that I talked about too, with social ads. There's video templates. there's newsletter templates, website templates. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, and they have different like images and stock photos and graphics and icons that you can use. That's relatively, again, there's tiers and plans obviously, but it's relatively inexpensive if you're looking to kind of beef up your marketing efforts visually as well. So that's a good tool. So just wrapping up here, regardless of the industry, the marketing, you should view it as mission critical. So if you aren't investing in your marketing, whatever that amount is, you're losing out on potential customers, opportunities, sales, if that's what you're looking for. But you're really doing your company or your business a disservice by not at least looking at marketing, right? Like, I'm not saying spend this crazy amount of marketing budget, but just identifying maybe, and I talked about it before, like even there's a small amount of money investing in Facebook ads, social ads that can go a long way if that's what you identified as one of your goals right off the bat. But for many small businesses, I mean, it is hard. It's daunting. You might be under capacity, under resourced, and it's just, it's almost like seen as those nice to haves. But when it comes to creating that, it's not as hard as it seems, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's why sometimes maybe looking at outsourcing marketing to an agency such as Alchemy is an area that might be right up your alley. And we have different, we're just like everyone else in terms of different, we'll work with you on budgets and different services. And we're not sort of like, do this and we'll give you that. Like, we're customizable, and we work with your needs as we go through these marketing plans and really identify what you need. Because at the end of the day, we want to do a good job. We want marketing to be seen as positive, because I think for so long it's like, oh, it's a lot of money. Some people might have had bad experiences in the past and it's a turnoff. But at the end of the day, it's really beneficial, especially we move into a space that's everyone's interconnected digitally now, and there's just opportunity. So I encourage you to at least look at it, whatever that may be. And if you're interested even to talk more about it, my contact information is at the end of the presentation. We can have a conversation around it, but it's really worth investing some time into for sure. So is there any questions before we wrap up? We sort of flew through that. But that's okay. Sometimes I leave space for questions, but no pressure.
We did have one question, Drew, in the
Sure.
chat box.
Okay.
So it says, great presentation. Any tips for budget management, creating and allocating marketing budget for the marketing mix?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's and what I can do is, I think we actually have a blog on what to do, like how to start a marketing budget, right? Because that can be a daunting, like what's in a marketing budget. So one thing I would suggest too is it kind of goes right back to that marketing plan. So identify the areas that you really want to key in on before jumping into the tools, I guess, or how much you want to spend on a certain area. So it's really understanding, like maybe our focus is social, maybe that we really need to divert all our eggs into that basket. Well, then that's going to influence the amount or that budget that you put towards that, right? So it's really about understanding kind of where we want to go with that. But Jaylene, I can send you some more information on that, and you can pass that along to the person.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Does anyone have any more questions before we let Drew go?
Tatiana with Gray Wooded Forge Association. We're a non-for-profit small office here, so definitely social media posts are a challenge.
Yeah.
And just trying to wrap my head around how we can make it happen in our office here. So I would definitely like to have a follow-up conversation with you, Drew. But just a quick question. what are the differences between MailChimp and Constant Contact?
I mean, they're competitors. They're similar. I mean, there's similarities. I'd have to dive into it a little bit more, but I know like we do have clients that use Constant Contact as well. It's just different. It's just a competitor, right? So MailChimp, just off the top of my head, seems to have a little bit more flexibility and functionality when it comes to the look and feel of when you're creating your newsletters. So for me, that would be the most popular one, but Constant Contact isn't bad. It does. I'd say they're neck and neck. They're right there. But
Okay, so we're not. I'm thinking, okay, do we need to switch now? Is
No.
one better over the other?
Not at all. I mean, no. I mean, it's just a preference thing, and but there's nothing wrong with Constant Contact for sure.
Okay. Do you offer any workshops on like the technical side of, how to effectively use, like, say, Constant Contact, Canva, for people who, we're making do with just intuitively, creating newsletters and sending out emails, but I know the potential is so much greater. We're just not tapping into it. Do you have?
Yeah, we do. We have resources. I don't know if we have. I think we might have an upcoming webinar on like the tools side of things, but I know we have some blog posts on like recommendations on how to use Canva or thinking like kind of along those lines of your questioning, like, yeah, we want to use it, but how? Right. So yeah, I can get those over to Jaylene to get to you, or even if you send me a quick email, we can start connecting directly and I can help you out for sure.
Okay. Right.
We haven't, oh, sorry.
No, I'm done. Thanks, Drew.
No problem.
We have one more question. Any other tips for advertising, planning, and buying, like digital and printing? Where's a good place to look or start getting ideas for those costs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's media buyers, like I don't know what market you're in, but there's people who can assist with that, like media buying agencies. We don't really directly do that here at Alchemy, but we offer basically kind of like your question, what to look for. So what I would suggest is, again, it's kind of identifying what you want to achieve. So before you go to these media buying sites or agencies, it's really identifying what your goal is, because they'll be like, oh yeah, we can do that. What's your budget? And then it's really about that. So, but I think one thing that I like to start with is even just if you just think about sites or websites or platforms that you consume, right? Or that you've seen an ad on, and then maybe start there. And I can definitely, we've done some research on that, on how those ad placements work and kind of how to get into that regard. But yeah, I would just suggest about, if you're curious on why something is on a website or you want to get there, then I'd start there for sure.
Well, I guess if there's no more questions, I guess we can wrap up the day. Well, thank you so much, Drew. That was, like you said, there's so much information and you kind of jam-packed a lot into 2 hours, which is great.
No problem. Yeah, I hope everyone picked up something and learned something, and yeah, awesome.